Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture we're going to look at EC2 Hibernate. So what we've learned so far is that we can stop and terminate EC2 instances, and if we stop the instance, the data is kept on the disk with EBS and will remain on the disk until the EC2 instances is started again. And if the instance is terminated, then by default the root device volume will also be terminated. So when we start our EC2 instance, the following is going to happen. Essentially what's going to happen is your operating system is going to boot up. So it's going to load Windows or Linux. We're then going to run our user data script. So these are our bootstrap scripts. And if you don't know what bootstrap scripts are, we are going to cover it off in a few lectures, but essentially it's a script that runs when your EC2 instance is first booted. So it might be a script that goes in and installs Apache, for example, so to turn your EC2 instance into a web server. And we will have a lab coming up on that in this section of the course. And then our applications are going to go in and start. So this might be MySQL or SQL Server or Apache or IIS, etc. So there is a whole process to go through. Now with EC2 Hibernate, what we can do is we can hibernate our EC2 instance. And this is where the operating system is told to perform hibernation, such as suspend to disk, and hibernation saves the contents from the instance memory or the RAM to your EBS root volume. And we persist the instance EBS root volume and any attached EBS data volumes. So essentially what it's doing is it's taking the RAM and it's saving that to your EBS root volume. And that makes it, when you reboot it, a lot faster to load up. So when you start your instance out of hibernation, the Amazon EBS root volume is restored to its previous state, and then the RAM contents are reloaded, and the processes that you were previously running on the instances are resumed. So you don't need to start the operating system all over again and then start up MySQL. It basically is a way of deploying your EC2 instances much faster. And previously attached data volumes are reattached, and the instance retains its instance ID. So it keeps the same instance ID. Whereas if we stop an instance and restart it, that won't happen. So here is got a diagram, and it's from the official AWS documentation. So essentially we've got our EC2 instance, it's running, it's using EBS, and we've got our RAM in here. We're going to start the hibernation process. This will stop our EC2 instance and it will save that RAM down onto our EBS volume. It's then shut down and stopped, and then when we start it, it's going to take the RAM from the EBS volume and load it back into the RAM. And so we don't need to do things like restart the operating system or restart our applications, etc. So with EC2 Hibernate, the instance boots much faster. The operating system does not need to reboot because the in-memory state is preserved. And this is useful for things like long-running processes or services that take a lot of time to initialize. Okay, so here I am in the AWS console. I'm going to go to Services and I'm going to click on EC2, which is under Compute. And in here, I'm going to go ahead and launch an instance. And I'm going to go ahead and first we'll just start with the Amazon Linux 2 AMI. And if we just have a look at the T2 micro, if we go ahead and hit Next, you'll see we've got Enable Hibernation as an additional stop behavior. And then it says to enable hibernation, space is allocated on the root volume to store the instance RAM. Make sure that the root volume is large enough to store the RAM. So we just need to make sure that we've got enough space on our EBS volume to store the RAM. So let's go ahead and hit Next. And in here, we are going to have to encrypt the root volume. So if you are going to use hibernation, the root device volume must be encrypted. So to encrypt it, you can just click in there and just use your default AWS EBS key. And what we're going to do is we're going to increase the size, and I'm going to make this 25 gigs. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit Next. In here, I'm just going to give it a name. So we'll call it name, and then we'll call it My Hibernate EC2. And I'm going to go ahead and hit Next to configure my security groups. I'm going to use my existing security groups. I'm going to use a WebDMZ security group, which has got port 22 open to the world. I'm going to go ahead and hit Review and Launch. And I'm going to go ahead and launch this EC2 instance. So that is now launching. If we go over and view our instances, it's going to take a couple of minutes to come up. So I'm just going to pause the video and wait for this to come up. Okay, so my EC2 instance is now live. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hit connect, and I'm going to use EC2 instance connect to connect into it. And this will allow me to SSH into my EC2 instance. And then once I've SSH'd in, I'm just going to run the uptime command, and that will show me how long my EC2 instance has been up since it was rebooted. And you can see here that it's 2 minutes. So if we go back over to the console, we can go into actions and we can go to instance state, and you can see here that we've got stop and then we've got stop hibernate. So let's go ahead and click on stop hibernate. And that is now going to go ahead and stop and hibernate my instance. It's going to write my RAM down to my root device volume, which is encrypted. And then what we're going to do is once this is stopped, we're going to start it back up again. So I'm just going to pause the video. Okay, so that EC2 instance has now stopped. So if I go back in and go over to my actions, I can start that instance again. So I'm going to go ahead and start that back up. That is now starting. And once it's up, we're going to go in and SSH into it. Okay, so it's now available. Let's go ahead and hit connect, and we're going to use EC2 instance connect and hit connect. And that will now connect into my EC2 instance. Now, like I said before, uptime will tell you how long your EC2 instance has been up since it last rebooted. Now, we didn't reboot it, we put it into hibernation. So if we type in uptime here, we can see that it's been 6 minutes since that EC2 first booted up. So we can see that hibernation hasn't restarted the instance. It's simply basically put it into hibernation. So that is it for this lecture, everyone. You can go in and delete your EC2 instance. And now let's go ahead and have a look at my exam tips. So on to my exam tips. Just remember that EC2 Hibernate preserves the in-memory RAM on persistent storage, so on EBS. It's much faster to boot up because you do not need to reload the operating system. Your instance RAM must be less than 150 gigs in size. Instance families can include C3s, C4s, C5s, M3s, M4s, M5s, R3s, R4s, R5s, as well as we just saw T2 Micro. So there's a whole bunch of different families that is included. It's available for Windows, Amazon Linux 2, AMIs, and Ubuntu, and instances can't be hibernated for more than 60 days. And just remember that it's available for on-demand instances as well as reserved instances. So that is it for this lecture, everyone. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, feel free to move on to the next lecture. Thank you.